Welcome to the Nick Blevins Family Ministry Podcast. Our goal is to help you maximize your church's potential. You'll hear from top leaders in children's, student, and family ministry about the principles and practices they use. Now here's your host, Nick Blevins.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Welcome to the Family Ministry Podcast. I'm Nick. I'm your host, and it's episode 212. Comes out the week of Thanksgiving here in 2020, and you're going to get to hear a conversation with my friend Dana Williams all about how she launched her ministry to parents online. Of course, this was pre-COVID, but we're going to get to learn from her about what it's like to launch a ministry online, to partner with parents and connect with them online, all things that are important in our COVID or post-COVID world where we want to leverage online as much as we can. You can get all the links and notes for the things we talk about at nickblevins.com/episode 212. This week, Ministry Boost is having a Black Friday sale where you're going to be able to get a whole set of resources, a bunch of our resource bundles like the new family retention plan, the ministry box bundle, the newly released volunteer bundle. All of those are normally $100 a piece or $99 a piece. And then you're going to get the Volunteer Huddle Archive, the Discover Group Kit, the Ministry Internship Guide, the Volunteer Reboot course, and about 12 other resources, especially from our training archive, all about $600 of resources. But for a Black Friday sale, you're going to get it for $77. We're also selling my new digital church course for $97 instead of its normal $147. So if you're listening to this when it comes out, check out ministryboost.org to get any of those deals before they expire on Cyber Monday, November 30th. But enough of that. Let's go ahead and jump into my conversation with Dana Williams, all about her ministry to parents online, what it was like to launch that, what she's learned since she started that. And again, you can get the notes at nickblevins.com/episode 212. Let's listen in. Hey, Nick Blevins here with Dana Williams. Welcome, Dana.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. It's good to see you.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, same here. Tell us about you, your family, and Table 112.
Absolutely. So, as you said, my name is Dana Williams. I live in Houston, Texas with my husband of 21 years and our two teenagers. We've got bookends. So one at the tail end of being a teenager, he's 19, and then one just beginning as a teenager, she's 13. So they are, they're my life, just like any other person who has a family. Like I just love them so much. I am a family ministry veteran of more years than I care to admit. But I started out in student ministry, actually stepped away into the corporate space for a little while, worked for Chevron corporate, and then tried my hand at some entrepreneurship doing social media marketing when God called me back into ministry through children's ministry. And I worked my way up the ranks through children's ministry and then ended up becoming a next gen pastor. So overseeing birth through high school at my most recent church that I was at. In that role, I met some people who saw my love for Jesus and my passion for the family and equipping parents who really wanted to help me launch a ministry directed specifically to parents. And so that's where Table 112 came from. Now, what is Table 112? Well, it's this organization that is created because I realize that most parents feel like they're failing. And especially in a season like a pandemic where there's no manual for how to parent in a season like this. And the other thing is we have this pressure that our kids are only young once. And so I've been unleashed to create tools for parents as a resource to ministry leaders to help inspire a generation of parents so that they can lead better and have a lasting influence with their kids. Because I believe that like kids, parents they need circles where they're seen and they're loved and they're encouraged to grow. And so if every parent is inspired, they're going to lead better. They're going to have lasting influence. And I think that when parents live inspired, their kids thrive. So that's a little bit about me, my family, and my ministry.
Well, tell us about Table 112, the name, and how it got started, because we're talking about churches leveraging digital. And I thought it'd be great to hear your story about starting Table 112. It's a digital, basically, ministry. Yeah. So you had to launch that from scratch and grow it. And there's patience and persistence. And anybody who's launched anything digitally knows this. And a lot of churches are realizing we've got to do more digitally in family ministry, especially. So tell us about Table 112, the name, and like how you got it started.
Yeah. So there was a season where before this even started, I felt God's call to build a table. And there's something about being around a table and, like I said earlier, looking in each other's eyes that helps us in our discipleship process. And so the word table was going to be obvious. Now, 112 usually leaves people scratching their heads, but here's the story behind that. When I went to go work for Chevron, they handed me keys to the entire 40-story building. It used to be the Enron building, for those who care about that kind of stuff, but they handed me keys to the building and a radio. And the radio, they said, your number is 112. Well, I grew up in the home of a police officer, so we had a radio on all the time. To me, it was background noise, like a train or a grandfather clock. Like, I didn't hear it because it wasn't meant for me. And so it was interesting how God used me not being able to hear when they were calling me on the radio to show me, like, hey, I am trying to get your attention. I want you to pay attention to me. So I started really associating with that number 112 personally. My brother-in-law started calling me 112 as a joke. And then it pops up everywhere. Like, you see it when the microwave counts down, you see it in the afternoon after lunch, like 112 shows up everywhere. Sometimes we get it on table signs when you go to a restaurant, when we used to go to restaurants, right? And it's always been this little reminder that God loves me. Then I was working through Carey Nieuwhof's Highly Effective Leader or something like that.
High Impact Leader?
Yes, thank you. Where we talked about, where we were working through our time and how we spent our time. I knew that I needed 8 hours of sleep, so I started there. 156 hours in a week, take away however many hours that is for sleep. And I was amazed that 112 hours were left. And I thought to myself, those are the hours that I choose who I'm going to be. And there was something really significant to me about how that actually is our discipleship, how the micro decisions impact who we become. And so I had another time to gravitate to those hours. And then, of course, Romans 1:12 talks about getting together and mutually encouraging each other. And so there you go, table 112. That's the long version.
Lots of influences there. And you launched it, obviously, online because you're trying to serve parents. This wasn't like an in-person ministry or some kind of place that people go to or something like that. So what did you do out the gate to launch this online?
Yeah. So one of the first things that I did was work on some of my core message. What do I want to say to people? And to just be really clear about some things that we would come back to over and over and over again so that people would begin to trust the messages that they would be hearing. So you're going to know that by the vision of your ministry or whatever. And then I looked around and kind of did an assessment of, like, what opportunities do I have? What assets do I have in my back pocket? Now, one obviously was, my experience in social media marketing and launching some companies in my area. I could really grab onto that and say, I know some things about how to do this. I looked for free tools to start building a brand of colors and certain fonts that people could expect to see from me. And then I looked for, where are the doors open? And one door that happened to open just randomly was a friend from my last church said, hey, I've got a podcast studio. I know you're trying to start something. If you want to start a podcast, it is all yours. So I had no excuses. It was just kind of like, okay, God, like, you dropped this opportunity in my lap to do something with. And so then I had to start asking God, like, what do you want me to do with that? And so God planted a seed of an idea to spark meaningful conversations between parents and teens. So just taking advantage of the things that were in my hands and being really scrappy with what was available to me, because while I was receiving a salary from the foundation that we began, I did not have any kind of operational budget. So just being super creative and scrappy and building connections with other people is huge. Social media is meant to be social. So talk to people, go to their stuff and like their stuff, celebrate them. I think that there's a lot about that part of it and participating in what other people that you want to engage with are doing.
Yeah. What channels and what social media platforms did you start on? And has any of that changed? I mean, we're a little over a year, I think, in. And what have you learned as you've been engaging on social media?
So I love Instagram. And I think that a lot of the generation that is raising kids right now is on Instagram. And so that was one place I knew I wanted to invest a lot of time. I also knew that Facebook is kind of a place where a lot of people land. So those were two primary ones. Since then, I've branched out into video. I found, just based on interaction with people, that people like it when I make videos. I do a 2-minute Tuesday and I get a lot more comments on that than other things. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to adapt. And so I'm actually currently exploring with more videos. So I started a YouTube channel and actually have taken the podcast and put it on YouTube. It's a lot less edited than the audio version of it. But, some people like to see things and they like to see the expressions on your faces and that sort of thing. And so it's expanded. I'm on Twitter. I don't see a lot of engagement from parents on Twitter. And LinkedIn as well. I guess I see a little bit more engagement from men on LinkedIn. Maybe they spend more time there. So I don't know. I just keep making sure that I'm kind of spending a little bit of time, but definitely feeding Instagram a lot and using IGTV there. So
what does your rhythm look like? Do you have this plan? Like when I launch a podcast, I do these 5 things, or every week I do these things. And how much of it is it that planned and a system, and how much of it is just natural interaction, like you're talking about interacting with other people? So I'm guessing you don't plan that, but maybe you do. What does that look like?
So it's changed over time. I think as I began, there was, like everybody, when you begin, it's ugly. And so you have to assume that it's going to be ugly when you start, and just kind of get over it and have that ugly beginning. And then as you go, figure out what you're good at and what people like to hear from you. And so for me, I did need some structure, and I actually kind of developed a plan of here's what I'm going to do on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or a cycle of things that I would work through that I wanted to get to. And that helped me to fill in the blanks. So I knew that I would want to give a quote from somebody about parenting, or I'd want to give a verse or something like that. And then maybe some kind of a personal story. And so I was filling in blanks like that as I developed my content calendar. And even that, it's shifted from season to season as I'm learning and I'm growing. And so now that content calendar has actually I've pulled back the planned stuff, and I'm kind of doing a little more off the cuff things every day at 1:12 in the afternoon. The 1:12 is intentional. Anything you can do to get a hook in people's minds, oh, I remember this. We used to do young life meetings in college, and it always started at 7:17 because then kids remembered what time they were supposed to show up. I'm pulling from wherever and just trying things and seeing what clicks with people.
Yeah. How about, what have you learned in that year plus since you've been doing it? I imagine that's been hard. One of the things I wanted you to speak into is just the challenge of building something online. At the time we're recording this, you may have even seen, I've seen, Jon Acuff has gotten on YouTube a lot more and built his own channel up. And he had that funny comment that when he was starting out, his wife told him, I don't know if you're humble enough for this, because building on YouTube, for instance, was going to be new, whereas he had 100,000 plus followers already on other platforms. And I think that's probably been true. Now, because of his platforms, he could grow it faster than most. But for most people, most church leaders, starting from scratch, it's hard. It's an uphill climb. You got to be patient. It's a long game, right? So what have you learned about that, and how have you managed that?
So we have this different perception of online engagement than we do of in-person engagement. Where in person, if I'm sitting across the table from one person having coffee and pouring into them, we consider that meaningful. But for some reason online, if we consider one like or something like that, we don't value it as much. But realizing that when I'm talking or sharing something, that there is another person on the other end of that ministry. And even, in video, I picture somebody that I'm telling a story to or sharing a thought with. And that helps me to engage with them a little bit more. And I think that on the other end, just realizing that if this changes one person's life, it's worth it, right? And so that helps me to keep going on days when I'm like, is anybody even listening to this? And so that helps with the keeping the long game, and remembering that just because I spoke it into this space and maybe no one was there to hear it now, because of the nature of social media, people can come back and they can see it later. And they may go looking for the thing that was hashtagged with that exact thing that you were speaking into 2 months ago, but today it's relevant for them. And so realizing the words don't just go away because you said it and it was at a different time than when somebody needed it. That's one of the benefits of this kind of ministry. Yes,
it's just evergreen or long lasting or whatever. And YouTube, I'm sure, I'm not certainly a veteran YouTube person, but that's what you hear is you got to help it grow. You got to put in the work for a long time, and then you can start to see some of that later. And I think YouTube needs to know that you're going to be there for the long haul. And if we're going to send traffic your way, it's going to matter. People are going to want to see that stuff, but they don't necessarily believe that right away with your first video or your even your 15th video or something like that.
Exactly. And I'm still in that season for YouTube. So it's a new thing to me, but just staying consistent with it. You can believe that this will be here.
We shifted our kids content onto YouTube and it's building. And, my preschool director was noting that, obviously she subscribed to the channel and it recommended one of the videos to her. And she was asking about that. And I said, that's part of it with YouTube. If you subscribe, it will, and it's kind of random, like the algorithm, when it recommends to you. While we're sitting here talking, it recommended I watch our church's service from last week, which I did, just not on YouTube. You know what I mean? And so there's some of that we can't control, but if we just keep creating the content, that'll help it grow for sure. Is there anything like what's it like now with you and your social media and online presence and engagement, things like that might be different from 3 months in? And is there anything you've learned along the way?
Yeah, I think that people's need for hope is maybe even more pronounced now. And we have the greatest message of hope. And so I think that if we can look at our platforms as not necessarily a way to entertain or even educate, but as a means of like passing on hope to another person, people are really going to connect with the things that we have to say. So that's something that I'm learning and trying to implement more by being more vulnerable and being more authentic. When you're in the parenting space, that can be a challenge because some of the stories are not my stories to share. So I've got to be careful with that and realizing, that my stories, any pastor who tells a story has to make sure that they are not hurting somebody.
Sharing too much.
Through that. Exactly. But man, it's such a critical time for needing hope and people are really gravitating to that. And I find that there's a difference between privacy and authenticity. The more authentic I can be with my audience, the more they seem to resonate with it. And so that's one thing that I've really been working on and learning and trying to test the boundaries on is like, what does this actually look like, especially in a situation where I'm telling a story of my family to some extent, but I've got to be protective of some of that. So differentiating between what needs to be private and what is actually like authentic and talking about things maybe in a general sense rather than sharing stories about my kids. Now that may just be personal for me, but it's something for leaders to think about as you bring yourself to the screen.
Mm-hmm. I think most people want what is real. So being authentic and vulnerable. And then as a parent, especially, you're attracted to, I'm not the only one who feels that. Yeah. And my kids aren't the only one who's doing that, right? There's like that sense of like a relief, there's like, totally. You feel affirmed a bit. So I think all that is probably true. And it probably helps you too. And here's what I want to do. I want to shift gears a little bit because we've been having a conversation about kind of the strategy and online and digital and how you've leveraged social to create this new thing. And churches are doing a lot of the same thing with their whole church and certain ministries and children's ministry and student ministry. But I just want to shift gears a little bit and talk about like Table 112 and what you do and what are some of the topics you discuss and how does that help parents and for people listening, how can they listen and follow and subscribe and all that stuff. So tell us about what to expect with Table 112 for parents.
Yeah. So one of the things, there are 3 foundational thoughts that I try to filter everything that I'm sending out through. And that is that I want to encourage parents to start with me. If we're going to lead our kids anywhere, we've got to be leading ourselves into a closer relationship with Jesus, into healthier behaviors and patterns, like into all of these things that we know are good for our kids, but we have to go there first. So start with me is something that you're going to hear all the time as we talk about different parenting scenarios or situations that we're entering into. The other thing that I'm going to encourage parents to do is to partner in community. And this kind of ties in really closely with the idea that Orange has of widening the circle and inviting other people in to speak into our kids. But also realizing that as parents, we need that for ourselves. I need to sit across the screen or the table from you, and to be able to say, oh yeah, me too. And to realize that none of us really have vanilla kids. Like, our kids are flawed humans just like we are. And to be protective of them in that, but also to realize like that I hate to use this term, but like the village is so important for not only our kids, but also for us. And then the last thing that I'm going to do is I want to empower parents to engage their kids. And so I'm definitely focused on every way possible that we can create conversations and experiences that foster a meaningful connection between parents and their kids or their students. Because having open dialogue gives us lasting influence. Now, I have a 19-year-old who we don't agree on everything. Believe me, we don't agree on everything. And he is the farthest thing from a vanilla kid. But I know for beyond a shadow of a doubt that we have mutual respect for each other. And he's going to come to me and he's going to ask me for advice at least once a day, if not more than once a day. And to have a 19-year-old that's asking you for advice, I think is a mark that you have the influence. And that's been my goal in my parenting journey, is no matter where my kids go, no matter what happens with them, am I able to continue pointing them to Jesus? And so I hope to give other parents tools like that, where we can be that solid voice in their life that points them back to the gospel.
What are some of the...
Oh, sorry. Well, so those are some three foundational things that you're going to hear me talk to parents about. But then, beyond that, we're going to talk through things about what does it actually look like to disciple kids in 2020? I mean, it's a different thing. And one of the things that I did when my daughter was younger was develop, here's the 4 kind of hooks or hangers that we're going to frame other conversations under. And those things are identity, faith, integrity, and compassion. And so just having big ideas that we attach other thoughts to. So we don't gossip because we have integrity and we have compassion for other people. And so those sorts of things, like we can, I wanted my kids to have something simple like that they could hang on to know, like, what does it actually look like to follow Jesus?
Yeah, that's good. It feels like values, you know what I mean? Like that you can keep going back to, like, these are the things we care about. What are some, I'll end with this, on the podcast, you have other parents come with their kids and you do that and you talk about it with your kids. Like, what are some of the conversations that you've had there that other parents would love to hear and be interested in, would help them?
Oh, it's so fun. That's one of my favorite parts of my job, because when I do this with other parents, they come back and they're like, I had no idea my kid thought that. And they're usually so blessed by that. It's kind of a scary thing to get on a podcast that's going out publicly with your teenager. But overall, it's been really a healthy environment because we have ground rules about how we treat each other. But some of the things that we've talked about, I've interviewed a few entrepreneurial kids, so that's always fun, just to kind of get like, what's the thing that sparks in you. This week's episode is from a mother and daughter who are involved in racial reconciliation work and their story. My son stayed up really late one night and asked me 3 really profound questions, like, how do you find your purpose, Mom? And so we went through those 3 great questions and hope to pass those on to other parents and teenagers to have those conversations. We've talked about how we use our phone. We've talked about choosing friends. We've talked about adult influences. Another favorite was an interview with my son's student minister and him, and just their relationship with each other. So that was a little bit different, but it was so fun just to hear the mutual respect that they have for each other. So those are a few examples. And then occasionally we do parents only episodes, and I'm about to launch a little series of parents only episodes as the kids get back into school. So I'm looking forward to that, where we can talk a little bit more in depth about heavier topics that kids are maybe not as prepared to talk about. So we've tackled things like suicide, sexuality, things like that in those areas.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, the being able to talk about that kind of stuff and have kids be part of the conversation, I just think is a really cool thing. It's a unique idea, and so I love that you're doing that. And I love that you're, leading this ministry from scratch, figuring this out online, building it. And I think that's where church leaders are in a lot of cases. Like they've built the thing that they've run in person forever, but now they know online and digital has to be good too. And there's so much potential and opportunity there. And so they're building, and they can probably, I think, relate to your story along the way there. How can people connect with you and with Table 112?
Yeah, definitely. So on the social media platforms, it's the Table 112, and that's the channel where I'm putting out everything for parents. I also have started some channels where it's Table 112 Leaders, and you'll find that on Instagram. There's a Facebook group where we're going to try to have more leadership type of conversations. I'm probably a little more challenging on that side of, hey, like, let's rethink how we're doing this and really dive into how we can better equip parents and serve them. But definitely Table 112. If you come to my website, which is table112.org, I actually think if you spell it anyway, you'll get there, but the number 112. You can opt into a free resource that I create every week. I give away 4 posts that I'm going to share during the week with just encouragement and inspiration for parents. It's totally free to become a member and to get that in your inbox early in the week. So those are 3 ways you can connect. If you want to connect with me personally, I would suggest Instagram. That's my favorite. DanaWilliams.me is how you find me there.
Yep, that's where you live. That's where you post. And I see those. I see your videos show up there. And in my head, and of course, I've probably not seen them at 112, right? But there is that thing that you've become consistent. You're consistent with it. So I know what it is when I see it. You know what I mean? So there's something to be said for that too. I mean, I think there's some real value there. That's another tip for us. Well, thanks for what you do for Table 112, how you're serving parents and church leaders and families. And thanks for sharing this with us.
Thanks, Nick. It was fun.
Well, Dana's done an amazing job with Table 112 and the podcast and all of that. And certainly, as I think about 3 action items coming out of that interview, one of them is to find and subscribe and listen to her podcast for sure. So make sure you subscribe and listen to that. Another thing I thought about is, can you find one way to connect with parents online? You know, that's how she's primarily connecting with and serving parents. How can you and your ministry and your church find one way to connect with parents online? And then a third action step is, how can you feature some conversations with parents in your church? I just think parents love to hear from other parents. That helps them realize they're not as crazy as they think. And, you know, their situation isn't as unique as they think, or whatever it might be. So maybe it's like a monthly interview, like a podcast format. Maybe it's on video. Maybe it's just something that a parent emails answers to some questions and you send that out somewhere. I think there's a lot of different ways that we could do that, but find some way to feature some conversations with parents. Like I mentioned in the beginning, this is the week of the Black Friday sale with Ministry Boost. Go to ministryboost.org to get over $600 of resources for $77. Or if you're interested in my new digital church course, you can get that as well. The Christmas and Advent bundle is still for sale. There's still time left to take that, tweak it, and implement it in your church to help families celebrate Advent and Christmas this season. Get all the links and notes from my conversation there with Dana at nickblevins.com/episode 212. And that's it for this episode. I hope you have a great Thanksgiving. It has been a crazy, stupid, dumb year, hasn't it? And yet at the same time, we all have things to be thankful for. And so I hope this week it might look different for you and you know what Thanksgiving looks like. Maybe you're listening to this after the fact and you just remember how different Thanksgiving was this year. It's certainly going to be different for me and for my family. But let's all hold on to the things that we can be thankful for, the things that are always true, God's truths that we can hang on to regardless of the circumstances. Let's hang on to that. Let's be thankful for those this year. And I hope this podcast is helpful to you. I am definitely thankful for you and for your ministry and for how you lead and serve and reach new people with the gospel. Thanks for the hard work you do. And I hope that this has been helpful to you in some way. Have a great week, great Thanksgiving. If you're listening to this after the fact, maybe you'll take a moment to be thoughtful and reminded of what you're thankful for. But I'm thankful for you. I'll catch you next time on the Family Ministry Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Nick Blevins Family Ministry Podcast. We hope this helps you maximize your church's potential. We would love to hear stories of how you apply what you've learned. You can do that by leaving a comment on iTunes or in the show notes at nickblevins.com.